Okay, so you guys might be looking at this table and be like, oh, yeah, that's the C-score table. We've been working with it. And yes, we will continue working with it. Now we're going to move into what we call confidence interval. But first, let's talk about some percentages. Like the confidence interval, I can ask you guys, how confident, right? Hence, confidence. How confident are you that on your next test, you will get between 0 and 100%? And I'm pretty sure you guys will be, well, I'm 100% confident, right? Because between 0 and 100%, pretty sure you're there. Now, if I ask you guys as a group, let's say I got all my students together and I ask people, how confident are you? Like, do you think you're gonna get somewhere in between, let's say 40% and 60%, or at least a C, or at least a B? How confident are you? And then the percentages will vary. That's exactly what we're gonna be moving on. So we're gonna looking at percentages first. So here we're gonna find the C-score for alpha divided by 2. For alpha, it is equal to 0.016. Now looking at our normal distribution, right? We've been dealing with normal distributions for a while. Now looking at a normal distribution, let's say I had my graph like this. We're familiar with this, and then we're familiar with the average somewhere in the center. And then we know the area under the whole graph is 100%. Now I'm just going to ask here, how confident are you, or what's the percentage, what's the C-score for the area that outside of our area is 0.016. Now when you think about that, that's kind of like 1.6%. Now there's an area, I want to know what's the C-score. I want to know how confident are you that's here. However, the 0.06, this number is going to be broken down into half over here and half over here. Now, if we think 0.016 broken down into two halves, that's going to mean that this part is 0.008 and this part is 0.008. Now, I want to find out what's the C value that will give me this range. Now, I know that on our table, I can find only this half. Because remember at our table at the bottom, it tells us what's the area from the C-score to the average. Now, let me do one thing. Let me find out I know this yellow area, this area that I highlighted, and this 0.08, these two combined, let me focus, just this combined is 0.5 because the other half is right here on the left, right? So hopefully I'm not confusing you guys just yet. Notice how my value 0.016, I broke it into two halves. I'm interested in just this area, but I know my table only gives me half of my area. And I know this whole half is 0.5. So I'm gonna say this highlighted area, this yellow area is gonna be 0.492. How did I get that? Well, this whole thing combined, the yellow area and this 0.08 combined is 0.5. So I just went 0.5 minus 0.008, and that's how I got this area. Follow me? So just looking at the half, so 0.5, I subtracted this part, the 0.08, and that's how I got the 0.492. So, okay, I'm looking for a C-score that will give me that value, 0.492. Let me see my C-scores here. Remember, I'm looking for 0.492. I know my numbers keep on increasing. I'm looking at 0.492 or 0.4920. I found it. You guys see? I found it. So what's the C-score? What is this C-score? I see here at the left side is 2.4. Here it is 2.4. Here on the top is 0.01. But at this point, you should be very confident how to read this. So I'm going to say my C-score is 2.41. So my answer for this first question is going to be 2.41. It says round it to 2 decimal places as needed. So, okay, so that's fine. Now let's take a look at this next question. So let me erase this. Okay, so now my number here is 0.332. Let me break that into half. So yes, I'm gonna go 0.332 divided by 2. Use a calculator if you need to. My calculator says 0.166. So this area out here is 0.166. I'm gonna say this area in here is gonna be 0.334. Again, how did I get that? Because I know half of it, half of my graph is 0.5. I just went 0.5 minus 0.166 and it gave me 0.334. Good. Now let me find my C value. Let me erase from my previous question. Remember, I'm looking for 0.334. Okay, so 0.334. I found it. It's right here. Now, what's my C score on that one? I see here on the left is 0.9. Here on the top is 0.07. So I'm going to say my C score for this one is going to be 0.97. Rounded to 2 decimal places. Okay, so I'm good. Hopefully this is not too hard. When I ask for an interval, and I ask you guys, how confident are you that you're gonna get at least a C, right, on your next test? What's the confidence that you're gonna get at least a C? Well, I wish you guys could say 100%, right? But some people might not say 100. Some people might be like, probably 80% sure. Well, the remainder, right? If you say the 100%, there's 0 remainder. But if you say the 80% sure, the remainder is 20%. The remainder is what goes outside of here. Okay? That's percentage of how much you think you might not get. How confident are you that you're not going to land in this area? So we're going to talk about it a little bit more later. But let's take a look at this next question. My alpha here is 0.0106. Okay. But let me break that into half. I'm going to grab my calculator. I'm going to go 0.0106 0.0106 divided by 2, and it's going to give me 0.0053. So I'm going to say this area right here, it is 0.0053. And based on that, I'm going to say this area right here, it is 0.4947. Follow me? Remember, those two combined have to add up to 0.5 because it is only half of our graph. So, okay, let me find on my C table 0.4947. And don't quite find it, but I see two values. I see the smallest value before, right below, and the smallest value right above. I'm going to say 0.4947 is right in between these two values. Now we know how to deal with decimals. We know how to place them. So I'm going to say my C-score. If it was 0.4946, I know is 2.55. If it was 0.4948, I know my C-score will be 2.56. Follow me so far? So in between, let's just say my my C-score is right here, right in between. So right in between, can I just call this 2.555? You guys might be wondering, where did that other 5 come from? Well, let me extend this to two numbers right here. So you guys, I'm gonna look at this last two numbers, 50, 60. So the number in between should be 55. Yeah, does that make sense? Do you guys follow me? So my C-score, the C-score that I'm looking for is 2.555. Okay. So for right now, let me just write my C-score is 2.555. Unfortunately, it says round to 2 decimal places, not 3. If it said, write it as 3 decimal places, awesome, I'm good to go. But this thing says round it to 2 decimal places. My third decimal place, it is big enough. So my answer will end up being 2.56. My actual C value was 2.555. So I call it 2.56 when I round it. Okay. Now let me erase this. I'm going to work my last example on the top of our notes. Let me erase this up here. Okay, so now my value here is 0.01. Let me divide that by 2. Some of you right now might be still wondering, why did we divide this by 2? You guys see how there's an area on the left and an area on the right? So that's why I divided by 2. Now 0.01 divided by 2 is 0.005. So I use a calculator if you need to. Now, based on this value, I'm going to say this area, I'm going to highlight it in red. This area in red is going to be 0.495. Because remember, when 0.5 minus 0.005, so it gave me 0.495. Good. Let me look on my seat scored. I'm looking for the value 0.495. I'm going to say it's in between these two values. It's right here in between. Right, 0.495 is the same thing as 0.495. 0.4950. So it's right in between them. I know if it was 0.4949, if it was this value, my C-score would have been 2.57. If it was this value, it would have been 2.58. So matter of fact, let me add an extra zero, right? That extra zero doesn't affect it. So now this value in between. What is right in between it? What is right in between? I'm gonna call this 2.575. Okay, are we good on that one? 2.575. If you're still wondering, how does Mr. Leonzo get that number? Okay, do this. Add these two numbers. Add those two numbers and divide it by 2. That's how you find a number in the center. Okay, so 2.575. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to say that my value here will be 2.575. Now read the instructions. Round to 2 decimal places. My third decimal place is big enough, so my answer will be 2.58. I had to round it to 2 decimal places. Okay, so hoping this is not too hard. Again, we're starting unit 11, so every beginning of a unit is not that hard. Now let's come back over here. Let me erase this work because I'm going to use this table for the bottom. I want you to start getting familiarized with a formula. Notice how this formula is right here. There's like an X with a line on top. There's like a plus or minus. Then there's a numbered. And then notice how inside parentheses I have sigma divided by the square root of n. Okay. I really want you guys to start getting familiarized. We're going to use this formula later, like later on this unit. Right now, in reality, what I really want you to focus on is this number. So in my case, it's this number, 0.84. Okay. Where does that 0.84, based on this thing, what is my percentage? What is my probability? Use the C-score table. So 0.84. Okay, let me take a look at here. 0.84. So here's 0.8. Here's 4. And it gives me my probability. That C-score gives me 0.2995. So my C-score, 0.84, gave me 0.2995. Okay. So for right now, let me just write this 0.2995. Remember, that's what we got from the C-score table. But remember how the C-score, the C table, gives us only half of the probability? Let me multiply this by 2. Because remember, when we have a normal distribution, here's my average in the center, and then my table only gives me this stuff. However, we have the same area on the other side. So that's why I'm going to multiply this by 2. So 0.2995, let me multiply that by 2. According to my calculator, I get 0.599. Okay, now here it's asking what is the confidence level of each of the following confidence interval for mu? And it gave me a decimal, 0.599. But I see that here I have something as an n as a percentage. Remember I mentioned in the previous unit that probability is percentage given as a decimal. That's why it's a number between 0 and 1. It's a percentage given as a decimal. Now here I had to give it as a percentage. So my decimal 0.599. My percentage in this case is going to be 59.9%. Remember, when you have a decimal, you remember that foundations class or pre-algebra or even algebra, they said when you have a decimal, you're going to move this to percentage, just multiply this by 100. And that's how I got the 59.9. Some people even say just move the decimal 2 places to the right. That's really what happens when you multiply by 100. So now to find a percentage, we multiplied my decimal. I multiplied it by 100. Here it says round to 2 decimal places. My instruction says round to 2 decimal places as needed. I only have 1 decimal place. That's fine. I'm gonna leave it as 1. It says as needed. So what if I have more than 2 decimal places? All right, let's take a look at our last example for today. My C-scored, what I really want you to focus is 2.155. What probability do you get with that 2.155? Okay, let's see. Now, 2.155, let me write it up here. That's going to be basically in between 2.150 and 2.160. Follow me? So I really want to know what's the percentage in between 2.15 and 2.16. Now, 2.15 is this number, and 2.16 is this number. You guys follow me? Do you guys see where I got my percentages? 2.15 and 2.16. The number that I'm looking for is right in between those two. So 2.155. Again, this 2.15 is this. The 2.16 is this. So in between, what's a decimal? What's a number that is in between 0.4842 and 0.4846? Well, probably some of you guys can already tell it. If you guys cannot tell, what's the number right in between it? Add those two numbers. So do me a favor, add 0.4842 plus 0.846. So add them up and then divide it by 2. And that's how you're going to get what number it is right in between them. Okay, so I'm going to say I got 0.4844. Is that what you guys got? Okay, so 0.4844. Remember, I have to multiply this by 2 because my table only gives me half of my graph, only half of my percentage. According to this, my decimal that I get is 0.9688. I had to give my percentage. Remember, I had to give it as a percentage, not as a decimal. So what I'm going to do, my decimal, let me multiply this by 100. I know some of you guys know the shortcut. Just move the decimal place 2 places to the right. So that gives me 96.88. Okay, so that will be it. 96.88. Rounded to 2 decimal places as needed. I do have it as 2 decimal places, so I'm good to go.